Remember the RX-7? Mazda's bare-bones sports car that made enthusiasts grin from ear to ear. But enthusiasm alone could not keep the 7 alive. And in 1995, it left our shores because it was getting too expensive. Buyers who could afford the nearly $40,000 sticker wanted more practicality for their money. So, when Mazda set out to make the new RX-8, they were determined it would not have the same faults. Practicality, performance, and price were all goals Mazda wanted to achieve with the RX-8. And to do this, they went about designing a 4-seat, 4-door sports coupe that could make as much horsepower as the RX-7 without the use of turbos. The process began in 1995 with the debut of the RX-01, a concept car that resembled the old 7 but used a new side-port rotary engine to get its power. The next step in the 8's evolution came in the form of the RX Evolve, a naturally aspirated 280 horsepower sports car that could seat 4 adults.
This RX Evolve looks very much like the RX-8 because it's got the 4-passenger sports car concept here. If we open the back door, you can see it's got room for 4 in this compact cab. It has this rearward opening helper door, and this is essentially what's been carried through to production with the new RX-8, and it was all born back 3 years ago with this RX Evolve.
Inside, the RX-8 is almost identical to its concept, and here's where its practicality becomes obvious. The front seats are well bolstered to keep you planted in the corners, and in back there's plenty of room for 2 adults. And to remind the driver that his 4-door is a sports car, he faces 3 gauges with the 9000 redline tack taking center stage. With the RX-8, Mazda made good on their promise of making a more practical sports car. But we were left asking, would a vehicle that could seat 4 adults still inspire enthusiasm? To answer our question, Mazda gave us access to Laguna Seca, and here with a couple of RX-8s straight from Japan, we went about throwing them into the corners to see if Mazda's promise of performance held true. We found that diving into corners at high speed could be done with incredible confidence thanks to its all-new chassis. Mazda placed high importance on rigidity and achieved about twice as much bending and torsional stiffness as the RX-7. The front suspension is improved with forged aluminum control arms that are longer than their RX-7 counterparts. And in back, the 8 uses a 5-element multi-link setup that is again longer than the 7's and improves the RX-8's overall geometry. Powering this chassis is a totally revised version of the rotary engine. Called the Renesis, Mazda has moved the exhaust ports to the side of the rotor for better fuel economy, better emission, and even more power. That means 247 horsepower coming from the naturally aspirated 1.3-liter 2-rotor Wankel, which, by the way, is only 8 horses less than the RX-7 with twin turbos. The improved power translates into a 0 to 60 time of 5.9 seconds. But there is a downside to the naturally aspirated Renesis.
The only real low of this car is that we'd like to have more power in it. The rotary makes 247 horsepower, but it doesn't make a lot of torque. And that means you've really got to row the gearbox and wind the motor to make it work. The engine loves to rev. It's got a 9,000 RPM red line, and it's really smooth up there. In fact, there's a little buzzer that comes on at about 8,500 to let you know that you're approaching 9,000, because you wouldn't know it otherwise. There's no thrashing, there's no drumming, there's no nothing else. But still, I think I would like this car more if when I pressed on the gas at 3,000 or 4,000, it would pin me in the seat a little more. As it is, you know, 6th gear, 3,000 RPM, floor the throttle, you got to look at the tack to see if you're accelerating.
But wind those gears to $9 grand, and you're playing boy racer with the best of them. And what about Mazda's promise on price? Well, you can get into an entry-level 210 horsepower RX-8 for just over $25,000. But even with the 250 horsepower Wankel and every option, the price climbs to only $31,280, proving that Mazda has achieved practical performance at a non-premium price.